Hello and welcome to today's video. Today I'm going to paint a fish in watercolour and I'm going to take you through the entire process from start to finish. It's about a 30-minute video, give or take. So what you can do is just skip any parts that you lose interest in if you want to get to another section or another part of the painting. But I thought I'd show the complete process so I'm not leaving anything out. What you're seeing here is me drawing the initial drawing of the fish. I'm just using a mechanical pencil. And I am looking at a reference image on my computer to draw this fish. So I'm just putting down really simple lines and simple shapes, which I'll fill in with watercolour. I'm doing the eye now, and then there's a little fin. So I'm drawing on Archer's watercolour paper, hot pressed paper, so it's smooth. And this is 600 GSM paper, so it's nice and thick, more like a card than a paper. And this is really beautiful watercolor paper. It's what I use all the time to do my watercolor paintings. Oops. So there we go. Just finishing up this fish. And if you thought you might want to paint along with me, I think I'll hold the fish up in a minute and you could just, if you were looking at this on your computer, you could just pause the screen and then trace over the outlines of my fish with tracing paper and then transfer that to paper if you felt like you wanted to do that. So I'm almost finished. Oh, another mistake. Oh yeah, just rubbing out those lines. So there you go. It's just a very simple outline. That's what I usually start with. So now I'm going to add my first layer of watercolor paint. I paint in layers, so when I'm doing my watercolors, I'll paint a first layer, wait for that to dry, and then a second layer and wait for that to dry. And then I might do one or two more layers depending on how much detail I want to put into the painting. So this first layer is usually basically just a wash. I'll be doing wet on wet painting mostly. So here I'm just filling in the fish with a really watered down watercolor. I'm using a lot more water than paint. And then once that's wet, the water will kind of sit on top of the paper and I can drop the pigment into that. I'm using Gansai Tambi, I think it's called Kuretaki paints. They're a Japanese watercolor and I am a big convert to these after having used tubes for years and years and almost exclusively Winsor & Newton. I just love these paints. They are vibrant, beautiful, light fast, amazing pigments. So they're really fun to work with. People often comment that my watercolors are very vibrant, like very rich, vibrant colors, and that's because I use these paints. A lot of watercolor can look a bit wishy-washy, but I like it really deep and rich. And that happens too because I paint in these layers, so the color builds up. And I give the watercolor a lot of depth by painting in layers as well. And you should see that by the time I'm finished this image. So here I'm just adding in a few different blues, just adding in basic kind of tonal areas, picking my colors, using a few different blues here. Yeah, nice purple on the tail. So I might just pop some music in now so you can watch the rest of this section without me talking over it. And I'll come back when I start the second layer of watercolour. Okay, so that's the first layer done, and I've let that dry completely. I've left it about half an hour to 40 minutes, so the paper's not damp, it's completely dry. And now I'm starting my second layer. I left the fins for the second layer so that I got a nice clean line from the edge of the fish's body. So if I hadn't left it to dry, the paint from the fish's body would have bled into the fins. So now I'm just adding a little bit of blue to that purple. You can see how the body of the fish is dried, and there's quite a bit of tonal variation in there. So I've got lights and darks. And I'll be going over that in this layer as well to give it more depth, more roundness. So basically when I'm working in layers like this, I'm starting out with just washes, and then each layer gets more and more detailed as I go along. Just adding a bit of reddy brown to the top fin there. So I probably should have said at the start that this video is in double time, so I don't paint this quickly. This is sped up. If you look closely, you'll see a couple of times in this video that I dip my brush into my coffee cup which is a regular occurrence for watercolor painters, sorry. Yeah, so I'm just adding a bit more color to the tail, a bit more tonal variation. In regards to brushes, I tend to just use whatever is a regular brush at my art supply store. You don't need expensive watercolor brushes. They are lovely, but the cheap ones will do. I think these are Westart brand, the one I'm using now. And it's a nice round brush with a pointy tip, so you can do a lot with a brush like that. I could have painted the whole fish with this one brush. I ended up using two brushes, this one and a smaller one for details. But this one, you could use this one for details as well, as it's got a small tip on the end, a pointy tip. It's probably just a little easier using a smaller, finer brush for all the details. So you can see that the colour's becoming a lot richer, a lot more vibrant. As I said before, I am painting this fish from a reference image. It's a fish that's found on the Great Barrier Reef, but I cannot remember the name of it right now. I'll look it up and put it in the notes. So yeah, now I've finished that second layer and that's dried, and now I'm adding my first lot of details. So I do 2 layers of details. I really believe that the eye brings the fish to life, gives it all its personality. The eyes and the lips, usually. Painting fish is a lot of fun. You can give them so much personality. So I've got the smaller brush now, you can see there. And just adding in its little fin, little side fin. When you're doing lines like this, it's best to try and be confident. If you get too fiddly, inevitably it will stuff up and go wonky, so it's best just to get in there and confidently do these lines. It comes with practice, but you will get better at it. So it's really starting to take shape now. Just adding a little more depth to the tail. And then filling in this little spot that's there. Just making it look more like a fish's tail now. Oops, made a mistake. If you do happen to flick a little spot of paint on your paper, on the white part of your paper, what you can do is just add some clean water to the top of it and just dab it off with paper towel. It works really effectively if you get to it really quickly. So it looks like I'm on a roll now. I love adding the detailed layers, it's my favourite part. So I'm getting braver with the lights and the darks now. Sometimes you've just got to go for it and trust the process. So it's really important that if you're painting in layers like this, that the layers are given enough time to really dry before you start painting over them. Otherwise you're going to lift the paint off instead of creating those layers of paint. And once you've done the layers underneath, it's best to work as quickly as you can so that you aren't, biting into those layers underneath. You want the paint to sit on top of the other layers. So what I'm doing now is I'm really giving the fish some shape by adding a watered down, I think it's black, a really watered down black. And just doing these kind of thick lines to just evoke a sense of roundness in the fish. Now I'm just doing some little shadows and details. But you can see that you don't need a lot. Yeah, you don't need it too dark. It's already given it more shape. There's a lot of fiddling around when it comes to adding these detailed or more detailed layers. It's a bit of trial and error and making decisions and problem solving. It's really fun actually. I really enjoy it. It's interesting to watch it back and kind of get back into my own head and see what I'm doing from the outside. It's quite interesting. I can see myself making decisions. So now I'm adding some details to the fins. Some little lines. You can see how confidently I'm doing those strokes. It kind of keeps them straight if you do it fast and confidently. And having the right brush helps, so you kind of want long bristles, a small thin brush with long bristles. I don't know the names of paintbrushes. I don't know the technical names of the kind of paintbrush, but I will write below what materials I'm using, or in the description, sorry. Yeah, it's really coming together now. Soon I will get to the fun part. Or the really fun part. It's all fun. It's all fun. So I've just brought in some new paints now. I literally got these in the mail earlier this week, and the funny thing is that I don't remember ordering them. I don't know if that ever happens to you when you're looking at art supplies online. Things just arrive on my doorstep and I'm like, ooh, thank you, past me. It's like getting a Christmas present. But anyway, these are, well, what I can gather, because I don't recall there being English writing on the box. So what I can gather is that these are like a kind of a halfway between gouache and watercolor. They seem to be a collaboration between, I think it's Holbein, Holbein, and Gansai Tambi, the Japanese paints that I was using before. I could be wrong on that, and if I am, I will put the details in the description again. But yeah, this is the very first time I've ever used them, and I decided to use them on this fish, and they are working really, really well as the overpainting on the final details layer. So I'm really, really happy. I could use gouache, but I do find it a pain squeezing gouache from its tube sometimes, so I like that this is in a palette. And a bit later I'll use the white, or very soon actually, and you'll see how good it works, how well it works. So yeah, it's kind of like gouache. So I'm just adding some spots to the fishy. A few more little details. And then soon I'll go in and start adding some white spots all over the fish. And then I will cut because that took ages. So you may not want to see that whole process. So yeah, I'm just getting the white now. And adding some spots in. Time to add the final details. So you can see that I've added in all the white spots, and I've also added some black dots as well. And this has given the fish real form, a real roundness. So I think it looks a lot more like a fishy now. And I'm just going to put in those very final details in the tail and the fins. I was actually really happy with the way this one turned out. I've painted a lot of fish in my time and I always really enjoy painting them. It's like birds, there are so many varieties of fish, and they come in so many colours and shapes and sizes. It's just a wonderful subject to paint. So yeah, I'm just adding in a lot of little highlights with the white. You could use any kind of gouache for this part. White watercolour doesn't work so well, so I wouldn't recommend using watercolour for these top level details. I would suggest a gouache. Ink might work. Well, white ink would definitely work. Coloured inks, I'm not so sure. And inks can sometimes add a shininess that doesn't look that great with the watercolour, but gouache, of course, works perfectly with watercolour. Has that lovely matte finish. So it takes me quite a while to finish adding in all these little details, but this is a really nice process. So we're coming to the end of this demonstration now. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you'll give it a go if you feel so inclined. If you do, leave me a comment and let me know how you went. That'd be awesome. So there you go, just finishing off its eye. Yeah, now finishing off its tail. I think it's kind of sweet. Fish always look a bit nervous, don't you think? Probably rightly so, actually. And there we go. There's the finished masterpiece. Thank you so much for watching. And I hope to see you next time.